Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is a memoir by Anna Marie Tendler titled Men Have Called Her Crazy. Oh boy, this review is going to be a little tricky. First, let me start by saying I do not judge memoirs for the author's experiences. My purpose at Booksmart is to critique the book based on the narrative choices of the author, how the author has told his or her story, and what those choices do to our reading experience. I also need to preface this book review by stating that I went into the book not realizing that Tendler was married to a celebrity, that I didn't research anything about her until after I finished the book, which kind of complicates my book review. I should have trusted my gut on this one, for I had picked up Men Have Called Her Crazy several times at Barnes & Noble, but always put it back. And then I decided to give it a shot, especially after reading My Good Bright Wolf, since I had few expectations of that book and it was beautifully written. That was not the case with Men Have Called Her Crazy. So the premise of the book, at least what I thought the premise of the book was based on the book jacket, was that Tendler would show primarily through her relationships with men how they have called her crazy, and how such a patriarchal comment continues to thrive in our society today. Such experiences led to her 2-week stay at a psychiatric hospital, and we as readers would get to learn right along with the author how to navigate all those unspoken rules about women's behavior. The book was none of that. And it's so unfortunate, because I'm sure many women can relate to either being called crazy when we dare to speak our mind, and if we're not declared crazy, then we're called a bitch, because those feel at times the only two options we're ever given. And sometimes we're bestowed upon the title of crazy bitch just to cover all the bases. Tendler's book will unfortunately just add to the stereotype of the entitled white woman. With the way the book starts, I thought it would center around her hospital stay with flashbacks that led to her hospital stay when she was 34 years old. Yet I'm struggling with the writing because it is so shallow, so surface, and juvenile. She's in her upper 30s when she's writing the book, yet the dialogue is like a 12-year-old wrote it. And it always includes the highs and the goodbyes, violating every basic rule of writing dialogue. Let me give you some painful examples, because in this case, misery loves company, and I want you to see for yourself. Anna, the house manager, walks into the living room. Dr. Phillips is here to see you. I look toward the front door and see Dr. Phillips, the doctor who did my psychological exams a couple days ago. I get up from the couch and we have a seat in the room off the kitchen. Hi, Anna. How are you doing this evening? He asks in his calm, steady voice. I'm pretty good. I cannot remember if I'm wearing the same sweatsuit as testing day, and I worry he might think I have not changed or showered. I want to see if you'd like to discuss your test results, if you might find that helpful. You mentioned in the testing that you studied psychology in undergrad, so I thought you might appreciate having a discussion instead of just reading it in a report. Oh. I feel surprised and grateful that he is taking this approach, speaking to me like an intelligent adult who can grasp psychological concepts instead of like a crazy woman having a breakdown. Yes, I would appreciate that very much. All right, then, let's begin. That's how it goes. But then let me give you another example, just so you know that this is kind of how things go throughout. Last night, around 8 p.m., Dr. Phillips arrives back at Dalby to speak with me. I wanted to come by to discuss the results of the 3 take-home tests you completed the other day. Would that be okay with you? Yes, that sounds good. Thank you. I'll have you look at this page first. These are your answers mapped out. I seriously thought AI wrote that. It sounds that robotic. What's even worse is that Tendler includes countless texts and email exchanges. So let me give you a couple of those examples, just because this is what makes up most of the book. Sean, yo, Anna, I feel like I just saw you. Anna, ha, 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 I'm so glad you're in this group too. Is the sober living place okay? Sean, me too. Smiley face emoji. Yeah, it's okay, kind of weird, but overall fine. Better than going back to an apartment alone where I can get into trouble. Anna, totally. I'm glad you decided to do sober living. Okay, I guess we should pay attention to the group. Sean, LOL, yeah. Here's another one. Me, we need to take another trip. It feels like we went to Miami forever ago. Sarah, yes, I agree. Always looking for an excuse to get away from work. Amanda, where should we go? Me, well, we've been talking about going to Puerto Rico for Carmel's 40th birthday. Carm, should we plan that? Carmel, guys, I love that you all want to spend my 40th birthday with me, but there has been a slight hitch in plans in regards to travel. They add absolutely nothing to the story. I have no idea why they were in there. And if you notice, the first text exchange referred to herself as Anna, and then the second one was me. And this was cleared by the editor. Because the whole book is written in this manner, I, as a reader, became frustrated and found myself rolling my eyes. When I turned the page and saw dialogue, I sometimes stopped reading because I couldn't handle anymore. It took me almost 2 weeks to finish the book, and normally I would have finished a book like this in under 5 days. But what really added to my frustration is there's no meat to the story. With a narrator who has cut herself for years, who wrote a suicide note after she went to a party in a fancy designer dress and no one told her how good she looked, and who claims to have had crippling anxiety, although that is all unclear, one would think there would be more than enough information to write a memoir. Her hospital stay is only for the purposes of testing, and for most of it, she's only with 4 or 5 other women. She only mentions in the beginning that her marriage was falling apart, and that's all we get of that. I have no clear understanding what led her to this moment in her life. She spends more time writing about making bracelets than any sort of reflective thinking. The flashbacks don't reveal anything beyond the normal trauma of growing up, which I didn't mind because her previous experiences with relationships were very relatable and very realistic. Yet as a woman approaching middle age, having a guy not call you back appeared to torment her even at her current age. There was little reflection on how those relationships shaped her. Her scenes just didn't connect all that well, probably because they are filled with ridiculous dialogue as opposed to the meat and potatoes of who she is. Her parents get divorced when she's younger, which affects her less than some jerk who ghosts her. It's a bit baffling. Which it then becomes all the more baffling when right away we learn how much she hates men, and she declares this. Yet none of the experiences she shares really lead to that conclusion. So here's an excerpt from some guy while she was dating for a while, and he may or may not have been cheating on her. He lied to her about communicating with an ex-girlfriend. The paragraph is actually a really well-written, profound paragraph. Here is the thing about men lying to women while telling them they are crazy or overreacting. The lying, the underplaying on their side makes us doubt our intuition and intelligence, so eventually when suspicions are confirmed, when we find out we have been correct all along, we do go batshit fucking crazy. And it is warranted. So this short paragraph shows me that Tendler is capable of getting to the meat and potatoes of the issue, of her bigger issue in her book, but she doesn't stay there, nor does she bother to focus on her experiences to connect to this theme, which is the title of her book. In fact, it would appear as though she's had more difficult times with women. She doesn't work a whole lot. It seems as though she sort of wandered around from one place to another and didn't have to worry about working to pay her bills. Although she does mention at one point how poor she was, but I think her idea of poor is actually the definition of middle class. She writes a scene when she did hair and makeup for photo shoots, and this woman was an absolute nightmare to work for, so she quit and never did it again. Then her therapist, who is a woman, well, I'm not sure I understand what all happened with that because her writing is all over the place, but their 5-year relationship turned sour fast. Other than some awful dates and some awful boyfriends, I don't know why she's such a man-hater. But here's some insight into her thinking, insight that really doesn't fit with the scene she's writing about. The scene is her doctor, Dr. Carr, called Tendler manipulative and said that Tendler has manipulated her team of doctors at the hospital, all of whom except one are men. And so she goes into this little diatribe that kind of gets off topic, but yet it's kind of at the core of her book, but then it doesn't go anywhere. I actually do wonder if male doctors are wholly capable of assessing female patients objectively, but not necessarily for the reasons they've suggested. From my view, the field of psychology was developed by white men using white men as the baseline standard for behavior and sanity. Centuries of conditioning has taught them, and us as a society, that when women expresses anger, paranoia, fear, anxiety, depression, or even intuition, they might be crazy. Years of my own experiences with men have taught me they struggle to see women as autonomous creatures with complicated, interesting, rich inner lives. Usually they see us only in relation to themselves. How can a person with such limited scope of another objectively analyze them? So this is really good insight, but she does nothing with this information. All she's intent on sharing with a reader is that no one else found her manipulative. And this is a recurring theme throughout the book. Tendler wants to prove to her readers that she is not what people have said about her. We get all the painful dialogue exchanges when her friends will reassure her that she isn't mean or manipulative or cold or whatever it is she's been called. If this was shown in those flashback chapters and then we see how Tendler has grown beyond that, that would have been great. But Tendler doesn't appear to grow much throughout the book. Instead, she repeats multiple times how much she hates the show Goliath. I haven't seen it, but boy does Tendler hate it. And likes to tell her reader how small she is, how short and tiny her wrists are, how everyone thinks she's younger than she is. It's all this shallow surface stuff. She also makes sure the reader knows how pretentious she finds rich people who live in the Hamptons, yet then she has to admit that she is rich and doesn't have to work thanks to the men she dates and marries. The only character I adore in the story is Petunia, Tendler's sickly dog. She makes sure we know how sickly the dog is and all the diseases and procedures the poor thing has had. At times it felt like I was reading The Mother Next Door again. But then she goes on dates that require her to get a hotel in New York, so apparently she leaves the dog often. My heart went out to poor Petunia. Once Tendler is released from the hospital, I'm completely confused as to what the purpose of the story is now about. She writes about some pathetic dates, says in passing that she's now divorced, and spends quite a few pages on her Zoom therapy as she obsesses over some guy who just wants to complain about his ex-wife. You'll even get what page they need to turn to in their workbook. Then, because all her friends are getting pregnant, she worries she'll be left out. So she freezes her eggs, a decision and process she spends less space on than the ex-wife hater. The story ends with her finally reading her files, which she claimed to never have read. She argues to the reader how their assessment of her is wrong. Let me read that to you, what her analysis is of their analysis. And she says, even though this assessment is more than 2 years old, I feel misunderstood and misinterpreted in the now. I also feel something familiar, a bumping against the limitations of a man's point of view. In this assessment, I see a portrait of myself drawn by a straight, white, cisgendered man, the standard against which modern psychology measures all else. I'm not saying there is no truth to what Dr. Samuels has written in my report. Of course there is. I am angry. But how my anger is categorized is reductive and without context. His inclination to substitute rage toward maternal figures and rage toward male privilege suggests an either or where a both might exist. It flattens my own experience of my rage by implying it's so similar across demographics that I've gotten them confused. I have not. My anger toward male privilege is not confused or surface level. It is cellular. I feel it in my body every day. It torments my thoughts. It has, for most of my life, dictated how I move through the world. This has dictated how she moves through the world. I thought that's what her book was supposed to be about, but there's nothing in the sort in here. What's interesting in her assessment of herself is that's what I see from what the doctors wrote, and I have no context for her anger either because she never fully develops it. I assumed at this point that her husband was rich enough that she signed an NDA and couldn't talk about her marriage or divorce. By the end of the book, I thought if Tendler hadn't bothered to read her official report from a hospital stay that occurred years ago, why get upset over it now? Yet here she is in the book, arguing with the assessment, and I'm not even sure it's for her readers. It's more for herself and her inner circle. Once I finished the book, I wondered what in the world is happening to the editing process. The title is catchy, but there's really no link in the memoir to it. And the dialogue, good grief, how did that get past an editor? In the acknowledgments, and yes, I'm one of those people who read the acknowledgments, she thanked her editor, who was strangely a man. I thought he must have been a rookie and would have had to have been a mime as a full-time job to be able to edit a book with someone like Tendler. As much as she despises men, I found it strange that her editor was a man who must have understood how much he was hated to allow a book with such poor dialogue make it through to publishing. Maybe AI even edited based on its robotic language. It's at this point I decide to research who Tendler is. Apparently she was married to John Mulaney, a guy who looks vaguely familiar to me, but I don't know him from anything specific except Saturday Night Live. And based on some of the reviews of the book, most people were absolutely infuriated because apparently it was promoted as a tell-all regarding her divorce to John Mulaney. My heart goes out to all those readers who thought that was what the book would be about. But I was more interested in the editor, so I Googled Sean Manning. Was I wrong about him? Oh, I was very wrong. He is now the top publisher at Simon. He appears to take on celebrity books. He did Richard Marx's memoir, which I liked well enough, even though I liked Richard a lot more when he was still married to Cynthia Rhodes. So Sean Manning obviously knows how to sell books, but I still can't believe this is the finished product. I would love to see the rough draft if this is what was the final draft. I imagine he had to tread lightly over any criticism because Tendler would not have taken it well at all. This is one of those books that just makes me so disappointed in the whole process of writing and revising and publishing and then reading that finished product, which was nothing like it should have been. Maybe part of my disappointment is because the book had so much potential. There is a story there, even if Tendler signed an NDA. Tell us what it feels like to have your heart ripped out as opposed to worrying about some idiot in your therapy group. Based on my cursory research, it looks like John Mulaney was not kind to Tendler at all, especially when he stated many times he was not having children, and then he has a girlfriend right away who is pregnant while he's still married to Tendler. My heart goes out to Tendler. Yet, Tendler did not capture how any of that felt. Even with an NDA, she could have written about her feelings without mentioning any specific actions from her jerk of a husband. Tendler is a self-proclaimed introvert, yet she doesn't really develop how that hinders her at times or how she can use that to her advantage. Her growth isn't shown. She's still obsessing over names she's been called, and crazy isn't really at the top of that list. Tendler did not bring these ideas together, but rather spent page after page on surface-level drivel that at times read like it was written by a robot. What a missed opportunity, a topic so many readers could have embraced. I'd skip this memoir if I were you. Save your money and maybe watch Goliath instead. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.